Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Sincerely Verolina channel. I am sincerely so excited for today's video. On this channel, I discuss topics such as healthy relationship dynamics, childhood development, self-care, foster care, emancipation, personal growth, and much more. So feel free to take a seat in the comments section and engage with the video if those topics interest you. So in this podcast style video, I want to discuss the poem called Preface in my poetry collection titled Things I Never Said. If you do not have the poetry collection, use the link in the comment section below and or the description below in order to find it and purchase the poetry collection. That way you can read along with me as we journey through this poetry collection together. If you don't want to listen to me read the poem for whatever reason, that's okay. You can just fast forward to the part where I do the poetry or the poem breakdown. Like if some people like to read alone. They like to hear themselves read instead of other people, and that's totally fine. So if you're one of those people, like, go ahead and fast forward. I'll see you at the time scamp, or did I say the time scamp? The time scamp now. I will see you at the time stamp. Alrighty. So I'm going to jump right into it because I know I can be a little bit long-winded, and this one is actually long. I was debating whether or not I wanted to read the full poem because it is pretty long, but I know that some people who are finding their way onto this corner of YouTube and this platform may not be that familiar with my story or my work as an author, or this poetry collection in particular. Therefore, for you, yes, for you, I am going to read this poem, but I will not promise to read every single poem in this collection. That's why you can go buy it and enjoy it yourself and read it at your leisure, darling, your leisure. All right, so we're going to get into this poem right here. I'm not going to read it with an accent, although I really, really want to. Like, you have no idea. I really, really want to read it with an accent, but I think it's going to lose, the serious nature of the poems. And the poems are pretty serious. They're pretty heavy, and that's kind of why I may try to switch it up and make it a little bit more engaging with an accent, but not this one, because this one right here, you may need a glass of water for this one. But this poem is called Preface. I decided to make the preface and the introduction a poem because it's a poetry collection. So why not, keep everything in fashion and make it all poetry, right? Poetry is life, darling, life. All right, So if you have your Bibles, if you have your poems before you, whether it be on the Kindle or the physical format, go ahead and take out your book. I believe that this poem is on page 7. Yes, 7. So I'm going to give you a moment to flip over to page 7. Yes. Go ahead. Do, 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 do. Yes, muy bien. Yes. Alrighty, bueno. So this poem is called Preface. Mother, truth be told, I am not going to remember any of this. Not my sisters, my brothers, my father, not even the home I had inside of you. When you look at me one last time, I will be 5 months old and unable to register your eyes. The neighbors who screamed domestic abuse will hide in the midst of all the madness. They won't see the officers drag you and father into the wintry night, or know that you wouldn't fight back. Not then and not when father's fingers weren't enough to soothe his itch. They won't know that you were his stay-at-home scratching post, producing and reproducing, but not parenting. When you have me, it will mark the 5th time you've been clawed at. So when an officer finds an infant on the hardwood floor, then scoops me into his arms, he won't understand why you can't cradle me with the same care. Neither will I. He will collect your children, gather us like belongings, and I am sorry, because I will not remember you. When a woman decides to foster me, she will bring me to her home. I won't know her family, but she will become mine. When she teaches me how to walk, I'll try to run towards her. When her friends say that she and I look just alike, I will giggle. I'll enjoy how it feels to see myself in her. In preschool, when my last name does not match hers, she will tell me it's because I am special. She will file for permission to change it. And I won't know why that bothers me, just that it does. So my name will remain the same. She'll teach me to say every single syllable with strength. This way, I'll know who I am forever and always. For some time, I will know myself. Then I won't. Then I will. Then a man who knows my name will call the house looking for me. When he says that he is my father, I'll say I don't have one of those. His voice will crack on the other line, yet he'll ask if I am ready to come home. Say he's been searching for me. When I don't respond, he will promise to see me soon. The day he arrives, you will stand by his side, proud to call yourself my mother. When it's time to gather around the dinner table, I will collect my limbs. I'll drag them to the other side of the room. Father will turn to you, then look at me, and I will whisper, hello. But I won't register your eyes. I won't remember the home I had in you, or the officers on that wintry night. So to keep myself from crying, I'll plant my bare feet into the hardwood floor. Mother, I am sorry, but I will not remember you. Preface. Bueno, let's all take a communal deep breath, shall we? Let's all just, inhala, exhala. Because I know that's like very, very heavy. Trust me, if you think that's heavy, imagine writing that, imagine feeling that, and imagine going through that, Dios mío. Pero anywho, so there's so much that I could say about this because with the preface, I did something pretty unique for the fashion in which I decided to write the poems, at least in the first part of the book. The poetry collection is split into 3 parts. The first part chronicles my journey in foster care. The second part chronicles my journey during reunification when I lived with my biological family. And then the third part actually chronicles my time as an emancipated minor. However, I don't really hone in on a lot of my experiences as an emancipated minor. Like that's not like the overarching topic or theme for the third one. That's just kind of like the period of my life that I was in. And that's what I decided to dedicate the third part towards. The reason I made the preface to the first part or I dedicated it to my mother, and I addressed her specifically because it sets the stage for how I entered foster care. I was not born and then placed into foster care immediately like some people are sometimes. I actually had, according to the records and the paperwork I've been able to gather over the years, I was actually in my parents' custody for several months, and then around 5 months old. I don't even know that I was actually 5 months just yet, but around 5 months young, that is when I was placed into foster care according to, my knowledge or my paperwork, I should say. So I just wanted to give the reader a little bit of that context so that you understand as you're reading the poems in the first section that I somewhat kind of knew my parents, but not really because I was too young to actually recall any experiences I had with them. But yes, it also helps you to understand the disconnect that I had with my biological family once I was returned to their care, which you will read about in the second part of the book. I decided to repeat the line, "Mother, I am sorry, I will not remember you," because the fact that I didn't remember my parents once I did get returned to their custody really drove a wedge between me, my mother, and my father, and also, honestly, possibly my siblings as well. I truly did not remember any of them. So the experience of being placed back into their custody was traumatic for me on so many levels. I genuinely thought that I was being kidnapped. And I mean, unless you've been through something like that, you probably just couldn't understand, or, surely you couldn't relate to the feeling, where, you maybe you have this like somewhat decent life with a group of people that you've known since the beginning of your memories, and then all of a sudden you're yanked from them and you're placed with people, and you're told, oh, ta-da, like this is your family, like yes girl, like enjoy, ta-ta. But you don't actually know these people, and these people are your family, quote unquote, these people are your family, but you don't actually know them. That is the trauma that I went through once I was reunited with my parents. And I decided to put the focus on that with this preface, because I don't think my parents understood the trauma that the separation had on me. And truth be told, I don't think my foster parents did either. We didn't talk about my parents. I was aware at some point that I had parents, and you'll read the poem called Finding Out, which of course details how I found out about me being a foster child, but it was one of those things where we didn't talk about it. Like, I knew that I had a different last name, but I was a child. I was, a baby. I was in kindergarten, I was in first grade, and then second grade. Like, I was really too young to be able to comprehend why my name was different from that of the other kids, or why, maybe I felt like an outcast, with the other children who were actually biological relatives of my foster mother. There were other foster girls in the home, and we were treated differently. We were separated. Literally, when caseworkers would come to the house, we would pretend like we slept in the rooms upstairs, but we were really sleeping in a basement. We weren't even in a proper room. We were just in a section of the basement, and our foster mother would lie and have us lie and pretend like we were living better than we really were. And I was too young to understand what it all was. Just like I was too young to remember my sisters, my brother, my father, and the home I had inside of my biological mother. These instances that I write about in the preface were not ever explained to me. I found out that I was the infant on the floor because when I was a child, I found documentation that detailed what the police officers found when they came to my parents' house at some point in time. And I read that there was an infant on the floor. And of course, I did the math at the time, or the date of the incident. I was the youngest child I was the only child in my parents' custody who was an infant. So I knew that they were talking about me when they described picking up an infant off the floor when they came to my parents' home. So I decided to set the stage and also document this also just for myself, like this is something that I found out a lot later. So it helped me to understand the disconnect between myself and my siblings. Even my sister, I had one biological sibling who grew up in the same foster home as I did. But for the bulk of the time, I didn't know that we were the only biological siblings in the home, or that she was my only biological sibling. She knew, she had a little bit of recollection of our family. So she treated me a little bit differently. I think that she was resentful towards me because she could remember our family and I couldn't remember them. And I attached to our foster mother as if she was my mom. I called her my mom. Like, I really thought that was my mom. Her friends would be like, oh, she looks just like you. And, we were born around the same time, apparently. So the same time of the year, I mean. So I really thought that that was my mom. And I mean, she was my mom, but she was not my mother. She was not my biological mother. So, there were there were so many things that went into the disconnect between myself and the other kids in the foster home, and myself and my sister. And I go on to talk about that in the first chapter. And I think briefly, the first part of the book, and briefly in the second part as well. So I mentioned it in the preface so you understand as the reader going into the poetry collection that this is sort of how it all began. Even though I don't remember it, this is how it began. This is how I ended up in foster care, the police taking us away. And this is what the vibe or the dynamic was like between myself and my family members. So when I returned to their custody, you can, understand how it was a little bit uncomfortable for us all. And you'll be able to read about that in the second part of the poetry collection. Now, I will say this. When it comes to the neighbors who scream domestic abuse, that line, like I said, we didn't really talk about a lot of things with my biological family or my foster family. However, I did witness domestic abuse when I lived with my parents. I did witness a little bit of that. So even though I don't recall, the first 5 months living with my parents, I do believe there's some validity to the notion or the story that the neighbors called the police due to claims of domestic violence. We didn't talk about it, but I believe that was the catalyst that separated my siblings from my parents' custody. So what I will say, just to wrap this up and not make it too long, if you are a foster child, or if you are someone who has a foster child in your custody, although it may be very difficult, I really do encourage you to keep a journal, or to teach that child to journal, so that the child can remember things as much as possible. And also so that you can write things down and give it to the child later on when the child is able to understand how she ended up in that situation in the first place. Because for me, I have been putting pieces together as if my life is some type of puzzle. And it's not a comforting experience at all. I've had to work with lawyers. I've had to do a lot of my own independent research just to find these fragments of my life story, because unfortunately, I had the kind of parents who didn't believe in talking about things. Even just the story of the officers. The only time my parents ever even talked about them being arrested or having their kids taken away was literally when I first got into their custody. My younger sister, one time, she asked my mother why we kept referring to Miami, because I'm from Miami. And at one point in time, we were all, I guess, in Miami, like together, except for the younger siblings who weren't born yet. I believe that is around the time that we were all taken away, because I would explain why I stayed in Miami and my parents, were separated from us and what have you. But again, I'm not sure because they never really talked about it. I just know that my sister asked one time and my mother explained that, the police came, they bust through the door and they arrested my father, they arrested my mother, they pinned her up against the wall. They were very aggressive and violent with her, even though, if the police were called due to claims of domestic abuse, you would think that they would be at least somewhat gentle with the victim. But according to my mother's account, they were very rough with her. They were very abusive, in their own way with her. And she said, they locked her up. They locked my father up and they took all the children, and that's it. That's all my mother said. She didn't really explain like what happened or what led to that. She didn't explain how many months or years or whatever my father was away, or how many days. Literally, that's all I got. And she wasn't even talking to me. My mother was talking to my younger sibling. We didn't have the kind of dynamic where I could ask my mom, like, oh, like what happened with this? Or, like I don't know too many things about my biological family members. And that's just because we didn't really talk. Like, and I said my biological family members, but I meant specifically my biological parents. We didn't really talk. Like my mother talked at me and barked orders at me, but she didn't really talk about herself and her life. So even some of the things I know about her, I learned through documentation, like from interviews she did with caseworkers and stuff like that. And it's really sad, like I don't think people understand the way, unless you've gone through it, of course. I don't think people understand the way in which you grow up feeling so broken when you only have little pieces of, your family to go off of. Like, of course, it doesn't mean that you are broken, and it doesn't mean that you don't know or you can't possibly know who you are just because you don't know too much about your background, because you decide who you are. You write that story. As I said in the previous video, the introduction video, you are the author of your story. So the fragments that you feel like you are in because you grew up, as a displaced youth, does not have to make you actually believe or perceive yourself as a broken person. But I understand, and I want to express that when your children only have so few details to go off of, it's very difficult for them to feel connected to you. You give them little to nothing to feel connected to, you know? And I didn't have an extended family in my biological family. Like I didn't have my grandparents that I could contact, or I didn't have my uncles and aunts and cousins. I have over 30, 30 plus aunts and uncles, but I didn't have them to communicate with as I was growing up with my biological family members. So I didn't really know much. Like I didn't have much to go off of. And that made it very challenging for me to feel connected to them. So I will say, like, if you have foster children or you have an adopted child, I don't think it's all that best to keep the truth of what they come from and where they come from away from them. Document that. Keep pictures and postcards and stuff like that if you can, because it does help, especially as we grow older and we grow wiser and we become more curious. We're going to be curious at some point in time. We're going to want to know, or your foster child is going to want to know, what led me here to you. There's no point in really sugarcoating it. I understand wanting to protect a child's innocence, but I mean, with all the debauchery, with all the degeneracy, with all of the, nudity and vulgarity that's all over the media, the movies and the music, I don't think we're doing a good job of protecting children's innocence, truth be told. It's the innocence is gone by the time we're like 5. Many girls are violated by the age of 5 years young. So that innocence y'all think you're trying to protect, it's already gone long before you even realize it, because too many of you parents honestly are not paying enough attention to your children, and you're not paying attention to what you're allowing the children to consume. But that's a topic for another time. I'll save that and get on that later, because that needs to be discussed. And a lot of us in Gen Z have many testimonies to share that validate that statement. We can just tell our life stories and we can talk about what we were exposed to. I'm sure people in the older generations can talk about what they were exposed to at a very, very young age. And you'll see like that so-called childhood innocence, it's fleeting sooner and sooner with every single generation. So, if you can allow your children to listen to all kinds of nonsense and disrespectful, violent rhetoric coming out of, these radios and in the name of quote unquote music, then I'm sure you can have those honest, uncomfortable conversations about what your children are going through or being exposed to, or what they may have been exposed to before they were in your custody, specifically for the caregivers out there. So yes, I would say, lastly, talk to the foster children and or adopted children that you may have in your custody over time. Don't, in my opinion, it is not a good idea to just wait until they, I don't know, get 17 or reach 16 or 17 years young and then try to tell them like, oh, by the way, this is why your last name doesn't match mine. Or like, some people try to conceal the truth as quickly as they can. Like some people would change the child's last name. My foster mother attempted to change my last name as if that would make me less curious, or as if my older sister wasn't gonna tell me at some point that we weren't related to her. It's best to try to prepare for that moment, and even just try to keep mementos and stuff. One thing I will say is that my foster mother actually did show me a few pictures of my sister that my parents sent her. My father sent clothes and toys and pictures to us, and my sister and I never actually got those toys and clothes. We found them in her closet once upon a time, and we didn't know right away that those were for us, but of course, in hindsight, I was able to realize that they were for us, because why else would she keep all those clothes and toys hidden in the very back of her closet, when she has a house full of 8 children to take care of? Why would she keep that from us? But I do remember seeing pictures of one of my older siblings, but I didn't know at the time that was my biological sister. I just thought she was maybe my foster mom's kid. I really didn't put the two together until much later on. And if I remember correctly, I believe that someone burned the picture right in front of us. I don't know if it was my foster mother or somebody else, but I do remember someone putting the picture on the stove and burning it. But yeah, so I will leave it here because I don't want to make this too long. I wanted to just share that little bit of advice because I think that some of the caregivers do us a disservice as displaced, adopted, or foster youth when you try to act like we are part of your family. I understand that you want us to feel like that. You want the outcast black sheep of the family to be everything but that. But literally, by definition, as the foster child or the adopted child, that child is going to, be different. That child is not exactly a part of your family in the traditional sense that your actual children are. And it doesn't have to be something that's shameful. It doesn't have to be something that's weird and awkward. You can talk to the child about it over time. Allow the child to bond with you. Yeah, of course. You want to make sure the child trusts you, right? But I think when you start lying and concealing things and then everybody's in on it, it can really make the child resent you once the truth comes out. I know how I felt when I overheard my foster mother talking and I finally learned that she wasn't really my mom. It was devastating. Absolutely devastating. Even though in the moment it didn't change anything, it broke my trust for her. It broke and shattered the trust that I had in her. But I will talk about that when I get to that poem. That poem is called Finding Out, and it's in the first section of my poetry collection. You can read about it on your own time, at your own leisure, if you haven't already. Again, the link to the poetry collection is in the description below. So check that out if you're interested. If you haven't already. And if you do have the poetry collection, stay tuned for the next video and the next poem breakdown, because I want to keep this going. Like I said in the last video, we're going on a journey. I want to have these conversations, especially for those of us who grew up as displaced youth, adopted youth, and foster youth, because I know that we often don't have the networks and the communities to share our experiences. So, what we go through is kind of, tucked under the rug. And until it's time, to talk about abortion, until it's time to talk about things, that's when people want to, remember that the foster care system exists and say, oh, just put the child in foster care. Oh, just put the child up for adoption. Well, we're here to share our stories here on this platform and let you all know what happens to some of us who go through said system. So you understand the foster care system is not a solution. It's not, what you resort to when you behave recklessly and you create an unwanted child. The proper solution is to just practice self-control and birth control and just not have the child in the first place, so that children don't have to grow up feeling unwanted and being the outcast in somebody else's house, or being, somebody's source of income. because a lot of people have foster parents or caregivers who are really just in it for the money. And it's evident in the way that they treat the foster youth or adopted youth in contrast to the way that they treat their biological children, so more stories and testimonies to come. Like I said in the last video, if you feel comfortable sharing your experiences as a foster child or an emancipated minor or adopted child, or even just, as someone who grew up more conventionally than the rest of us or traditionally, go ahead and share your experiences in the comment section if you would like to. I'm sure you'll inspire some people. You may even resonate, or you may even say something that resonates with other people. You may find something that resonates with you. So enjoy the discussion, get it popping, get it, crack-a-lacking in the comment section, and I will see you in the next one. On that note, I will say, tata, mi amores, take care.
Gonna give you this mic back. But what I'm gonna say to the ladies that been told that you cannot have, you tell the devil you's a liar.